A dart is a little triangular wedge of fabric that gets sewn toward the inside of the garment to create three-dimensional fullness. The most common and standard version of a dart that you'll see is called the tapered dart, in which both of the stitch lines, which we call the legs, are perfectly straight and taper towards a singular point. The point at which the two dart legs meet is called the vanishing point of the dart. In sewing a dart, a drill hole is always used as an indicator of how far to sew. But we don't want that drill hole to ever be visible on the outside of the garment after it is sewn. So rather than the drill hole indicating exactly the point at which you are to sew to, it is placed a ½ inch inside of the actual vanishing point of the dart so that it remains hidden in the fabric when the dart is sewn. Before we remove our pattern, you'll want to make sure that you have used an awl to mark your drill hole, and where the legs of the dart meet the edge of the pattern, you will also want to give yourself a little notch with your fabric shears. Sometimes the pattern will have it more clearly indicated as a notch, but in this case, we see where our stitch lines are, so we want to be sure that we use our shears and just clip about 1/8 of an inch or so at the beginning of each dart leg. We'll be using those clips to match our dart legs as we sew our dart. After you remove your pattern piece, the side that's facing up is what we will deem to be the right side of the garment, as in outside. But we are also choosing this to be the right side because it is also for the right half of the body, meaning right versus left. To make our sample end up for the right side of the body, we are going to flip it over, and then with the fabric facing in this direction, we will indicate this as the wrong side of our sample. We will be sewing our dart so that the dart excess, or the little wedge of fabric, ends up on the wrong side or inside of the garment. You're going to begin by folding your fabric where your dart is to match your two notches together. So I'll be sure that my notches are matching right at the edge of the fabric, and then I want to look for my drill hole and fold my fabric so that my drill hole is sitting exactly on the fold line. Your fold line should also end up continuing exactly to this point at the outer edge of the fabric. Don't crease your fabric all the way over to this side though, because beyond the drill hole, this part is not being sewn. While professional sample sewers know how to do this without any sort of guideline, as a beginner, it will definitely help if you give yourself a guideline to stitch on. We want to take a ruler and we need to find the actual vanishing point of the dart. As we discussed earlier, the vanishing point of the dart is a ½ inch beyond where the actual drill hole is. This is what keeps the drill hole hidden inside our sewing. So you want to take your ruler, and if my drill hole is right here, I want to measure a ½ inch further along the fold of the dart and make a little mark right along the fold of the fabric. Then I will use the straight edge of my ruler and connect the vanishing point of the dart to the notches right up here at the beginning. Now we have a nice guideline on which we can sew. In sewing a tapered dart, we always want to start sewing at the edge of the fabric or at the widest part of the dart excess and work our way towards the tip of the dart to finish there. We will be backstitching at the very beginning to secure our dart at the edges of the fabric, but we will not backstitch when we reach the tip of the dart. Trying to do a backstitch in this delicate, skinny little area will oftentimes add too much thread bulk, or it can end up looking a little bit messy if your backstitch doesn't sit perfectly along your initial seam line. So we'll be doing something different as we reach the tip of the dart. Make sure that your machine's stitch length is set to 2.5 millimeters. That's our general standard stitch length for doing any sewing on a medium weight fabric like muslin, but we will be changing it when we get to the tip of the dart. Right as we're about at the point that our drill hole is, we will stop and reduce our stitch length to a 1 millimeter stitch. We're going to make our stitch length very teeny tiny as we go right off the vanishing point of the dart without back stitching. Using this smaller stitch length will help to secure our dart without having to have a back stitch. So here we go. I'm set to 2.5 millimeters for my stitch length. And I will begin with a back stitch right to the edge of the fabric. And we'll come forward, and you want to be stitching exactly on the guideline that we drew to indicate the dart legs. Now, I'm still sewing on my guideline, but I'm about at the level of my drill hole. This is a perfect point to stop and reduce the stitch length. So I'll set my machine to about a 1 millimeter stitch and continue to sew exactly on my guideline, just until I cleanly and precisely drop right off the fold where the vanishing point has been marked. To trim your threads, at the beginning of the dart where you've backstitched, you can cut them right at the edge of the fabric. At the vanishing point, where we did not backstitch but used our tiny stitch, cut your threads to be about a 1/2 inch long. To press our dart, we will first press over the top of the stitches, but be sure that your iron does not extend beyond the vanishing point of the dart. We don't want to press any creases in this area. Next, we'll need to determine which direction our dart excess needs to be pressed. On any sort of vertical dart in a garment, the dart excess will always be pressed towards the center of the garment. If we're imagining that this is half of a bodice, then this edge right here is the center front line. So a vertical dart would have the excess going towards that center. This dart is a little more of the horizontal variety. So when you have a horizontal dart, your dart excess will be pressed downward in a garment, or in this case towards the waistline. To do so, flip your sample over so that you're pressing from its right side. Be sure that your dart excess is going down towards that waistline. And run your iron right over the top of your seam, but again, being sure that the tip of your iron does not go past the point which you have sewn to. If you try to press beyond that, you will end up with ugly circular creases surrounding the apex area of your garment. So, only press up to the vanishing point, nothing further. Feel free to also rotate your sample a little bit and press out any creases that have occurred during the sewing process, which is common once you're sewing something three-dimensional like a dart. After your dart has been pressed, present it in your notebook with the wrong side facing up. A release tuck is a partially sewn dart almost, where you'll be stitching the fabric closed for a ways, but then allowing it to release and open up to create fullness below the point at which you have finished stitching. Make sure you have 2 drill holes marked, as well as notches clipped on the top edge of your fabric. We're imagining that this is being sewn into a pair of shorts, in which case this J-shaped curve is the crotch seam. Have your sample positioned with that crotch seam on the left, and in this position, we will indicate the side that's facing up as the wrong side. We're going to be folding our fabric at the top and drawing ourselves a guideline, similar to how we started off our tapered dart. Fold your fabric so that you're folding the right sides together, and you want to match the notches at the top edge, in addition to also matching your drill hole placement. If I were to stick a pin through the one on top, it should come out in the other drill hole on the back side. While your fabric is in this folded position, we are going to be drawing a line on which you can sew. Similar to a dart, we don't want this drill hole to actually sit on our stitch line or be visible from the outside in any way. So it is actually placed 1/8 of an inch inward from our stitch line on 2 sides. We'll be drawing sort of a box or rectangular shape where the drill hole is 1/8 of an inch in from the line here, as well as up from the line that we'll be crossing over with. So position your ruler so that you are matched with the notches, but as you come down past your drill holes, you want the edge of your ruler to be 1/8 of an inch away from it, as in the opposite direction of the fold. Draw your guideline straight up to the top. So our line should be starting at the notches and coming down 1/8 of an inch in that direction of the drill hole. Then on the bottom edge here, we're going to draw a line that will cross straight over. And this line should be 1/8 of an inch below the drill hole in that direction. So right here, there's my 1/8 of an inch line on the drill hole, and I can draw straight across. So in review, we have 1/8 of an inch distance here and 1/8 of an inch distance here. We'll be stitching, starting at our notches with a backstitch on our guideline, and then pivoting at this corner and going across to finish at the fold. For our release tuck, we'll be stitching exactly on the guideline that we drew, beginning at the top edge of the fabric where the notches are with a backstitch. We'll then pivot at the corner and come straight across and end with a backstitch on the fold. As we're coming down towards our corner where we'll need to pivot, the way to pivot at a corner is to lower the needle into the fabric right at the corner. The needle needs to be down when we reach that position. To ensure that you come the correct distance forward and don't overshoot it, you can always reach over to the right side of your machine and turn the hand wheel to walk it forward a couple stitches without using your foot. Make sure you end with the needle down in the fabric. While the needle is down, you can then raise your presser foot, rotate your fabric so that it's pivoting on the needle, and then lower your presser foot. Now we're able to continue forward on the rest of our line. Go right to the fold, and then finish with a little backstitch. In pressing our release tuck, we'll need to take note of which direction the excess needs to go. The rule is similar to a dart. If we have a vertical tuck or dart, then that means our excess wants to be pressed towards the center of the garment, in which case we will be pressing it towards this J-shaped curve, which would be the crotch seam on a pair of shorts or pants. But first, we'll press just over the top of our stitches, but not below, not wanting to create an extra fold. Then we'll open it up to the right side. Feel free to rotate your sample if you need to. And you want to have the excess fabric underneath going towards the crotch seam. You'll then press over your stitches just up to the point at which the tuck releases. After pressing, present your sample in your notebook with the wrong side facing up. A fisheye dart is a double-ended dart that has a vanishing point at two ends, opposite one another. Fisheye darts are indicated by 4 separate drill holes, so make sure you have those nicely marked with your awl. Flip your sample over, and we'll indicate this as the wrong side of our sample. As you observe the drill holes on your fabric, you'll see that 3 of them sit in a perfectly straight line, and then this other one in the middle is kind of off to the side of everything else. We're going to be folding our fabric so that the 3 drill holes that are in a straight line sit exactly on that fold. Ultimately, when this dart is sewn, the amount of excess that's removed is similar to a diamond shape, as opposed to the triangular shape of a single tapered dart. Fold your fabric so that you are folding the right sides of it together, and create your fold so that it is sitting exactly across all 3 of those drill holes that are in the straight line. Just like the tapered dart, we're going to be giving ourselves a guideline to stitch on. The vanishing point that is at the top and bottom of the fisheye dart is drawn similar to the one for the tapered dart, meaning the vanishing point occurs a 1/2 inch beyond the drill hole at both ends. Or in this case, the vanishing points are outside of those two drill holes. Take your ruler, and along the fold, you want to measure a 1/2 inch up from the upper drill hole and do a little mark right on the fold. Then come down to the bottom and measure a 1/2 inch below the lower drill hole. Mark it on the fold. Then you're going to come to this last drill hole we have here, the one that's sitting kind of off to the side. Just like with our other darts and release tucks, we want all drill holes to be hidden inside the excess as we sew it. So we're going to be marking 1/8 of an inch outside of this drill hole. From this point, this will be sort of the wide part of the diamond as we sew. So take your ruler and use it to mark 1/8 of an inch away from the fold or outside of the drill hole. And just give yourself a little dot for starters. See, this is 1/8 of an inch distance. Then use your ruler and connect all the marks we made. So connect the dot we just drew with the vanishing point on the top, and then connect it also to the vanishing point on the bottom. We're going to be stitching our dart exactly on this line. The main difference between this dart and the tapered dart is that we have a vanishing point at both ends. So neither of these vanishing points will have back stitching. They will have a section of about a 1/2 inch or so at the beginning and end that are stitched with that smaller 1 millimeter stitch length. But then the main majority of the rest of the dart will be sewn at 2.5 millimeters, and we'll do a little pivot right when we hit this corner. To begin our fisheye dart, make sure you have your machine stitch length set to a 1 millimeter for the first 1/2 inch or so after we leave the vanishing point. Raise your presser foot, and you want to be sure that you start sewing exactly where your guideline meets the fold, which is a 1/2 inch above the drill hole. To make sure you do this, you can turn your hand wheel to stick the needle into the fabric right at the beginning of the fold. That's how you can be sure you're starting exactly at the perfect point. Once you're all set up, make sure the line is also angled straight in front of you and not off at a diagonal. This will help ensure that your sewing stays nice and straight. Sew forward for about a 1/2 inch or so, basically up to where the drill hole is, and then change your machine stitch length to a 2.5 millimeter and continue. When we approach the corner here, you want to be sure that you end with your needle down in the fabric, right at the corner. Then raise your presser foot, rotate your fabric to align it with the next section, and continue sewing. As we approach our second drill hole, also stop right about at that point and change back over to the 1 millimeter stitch to sew the final portion of the dart as it drops off the fabric right at the mark for your vanishing point. Before we press our dart, you'll want to trim your loose threads as usual, and just like with our tapered dart, you want to leave about a 1/2 inch of thread from where you cut it at both vanishing points. To press the dart, first just go right over the top of the stitches, but not beyond the vanishing point on either side. Next, flip your fabric so that the right side of your sample is facing up. We're imagining that this curve right here is the armhole of a garment. So this opposite side with the longer straight edge will be the center of the garment, meaning we want our dart excess underneath to go in that direction. So make sure the excess is going that way and press the dart in 2 sections. So first, starting just from the vanishing point, we're going to press just up to where the midpoint or corner of the dart is. So just nicely along there, but again, not beyond the vanishing point or you'll end up with ugly wrinkles down here. Then kind of rotate and adjust the excess on the top to press the remaining half of it, starting from the corner and then moving towards but not beyond the other vanishing point. After pressing, present your sample in your notebook with the wrong side facing up. A cutaway dart is often used whenever the dart excess is very large. So cutting it away sort of reduces the bulk on the inside of the garment. They're also used if the dart actually has curved legs. Having the fabric cut away at an equal distance from the stitch line helps to show us the shape that our stitch line needs to follow as we sew the dart. You're going to begin by turning your fabric over and indicating the wrong side. Fold your fabric so that you're bringing the right sides together, and align the cutaway edges of the dart as well as the top edge of the fabric. Once you're at the little pointed end of the cutaway portion, your fabric will actually have to start to create a fold, and your fold should come exactly through the center of your drill hole. We're going to need to mark our vanishing point, which, as per usual, should be a 1/2 inch further than the drill hole on our fold. So take your ruler and use it to measure a 1/2 inch below the drill hole and make a little mark right on the folded edge of the fabric. Next, the beginning portion of our dart, where everything is cut away, will actually just be sewn at a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the cutaway edge. So typically you could actually just follow the guideline on the throat plate of your machine for this first portion, but let's give ourselves a guideline that follows the entire length of the dart. So use your ruler to measure a 1/2 inch in from the edge of the fabric and draw a line. This is a curve though, so you'll have to kind of adjust and pivot your ruler to follow the curve so that it is marked a nice and even 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric. Once you get down to this portion where it's no longer cut away and you're on the folded section of the dart, the 1/2 inch rule no longer follows, and you'll instead just want to take your ruler and use it to connect your existing guideline exactly to the vanishing point that you indicated 1/2 inch past the drill hole. Now we have a nice complete guideline to stitch our dart on. Similar to the standard tapered dart, we're going to be doing a back stitch at the beginning, but then reducing our stitch length and not back stitching when we come to the vanishing point of the dart. Make sure you begin by having your machine set to the usual 2.5 millimeter stitch length. And you'll begin with a back stitch right at the beginning of your guideline, and then come forward and continue. You want to be stitching on your guideline as well as being sure that the edge of your fabric is following the 1/2 inch mark on your machine, at least until we get to the folded portion of the dart. From this point, we can no longer follow the 1/2 inch line. We're just stitching on our guideline right until we get up to our drill hole. You'll reduce your machine's stitch length to 1 millimeter and continue sewing the remaining portion until you just drop nicely off the folded edge at the vanishing point. Before pressing your dart, snip your threads. You can remove them cleanly from the beginning of your dart, but then be sure to leave a 1/2 inch of thread at the vanishing point. Press right over the top of your stitches, but not beyond the vanishing point. And then, similar to the regular tapered dart, we want our dart excess pressed towards the center of the garment, since this is a vertical dart. For our sample, the center of the garment will be the long, straight edge. So make sure underneath your excess is pointing in that direction. And from the right side of your sample, work your way up with your pressing. Because this is curved, you can't go right over the top of it all at once without leaving undesirable creases. So do it section by section, where you press a small amount and then sort of shove the excess over to open it up nice and clean as you get up to the tip of the dart, but not beyond it. When you have finished pressing, present in your notebook with the wrong side facing up.